Tanzania's banking sector goes back decades with numerous players within it. But in today's episode, we focus on one major bank that has managed to make major milestones given that time period. We're standing at the top of the National Microfinance Bank, popularly known as NMB, a bank that has stood the test of time 20 decades later after an act of parliament saw the old National Bank of Commerce split into what we're seeing today. Now, this bank is by far one of the most sought after and the biggest bank in terms of customers and branch outreach. But how did they reach this level where they are? We speak to the CEO of this particular bank to learn about best practices and gaining market share in this very competitive, very edgy industry. Welcome to Captains of Industry. Banks had this conversation about global slowdown, pressures, economic pressures globally. And then here in Tanzania, all that coupled now with political transition and a new regime. Just give us your sense on that. You've been here for the past, at least a sizable amount of time to see what's actually happening on the ground. How has business been with the new political transition?
Well, overall, Tanzania has been a very stable, very growing 6-7% a year economy for the last few years. So, although of course there has been impact on the global slowdown, Tanzania has been doing fine. Since the election, it's been very interesting. The new president came in, of course, in his election, he was already saying, I want to fight corruption. There is too much corruption in this country, and if I come in, I will fight it. And almost from day two, that's what he started doing. And I think everyone knew there was a fair amount of corruption happening, and it was actually not helping business. It was also not helping government in execution of their projects and their plans. And within a day, everyone knew, this president means business. And he fired many people who were at the top of state-owned companies who were not doing what, according to the president, they were supposed to be doing. He, especially in terms of the Tax Revenue Authority and the Tanzania Port Authority, which are supposed to be large revenue collectors, where there were some major amounts, billions of T-shilling missing. He said, that's what we will focus on. And immediately everyone knew, this is business. I think the general sense is it slows down a lot of activities in the short term because people are not certain what to expect, new rules, wait and see a little bit. More taxes now have to be paid that maybe were not being paid beforehand. So business activity has slowed down, but I think everyone firmly believes, sees the value of it. And that by the second half of this year, when all those issues have been taken care of, it will take off again, and eventually it will be for the better of the country.
All right, now 1 year in as the CEO of what we're seeing as the biggest bank in Tanzania, yeah. How hard or how easy has it been now aligning or adjusting your policies to fit into now this new development?
For us, it was relatively easy because we don't have to align a lot. We're a large retail bank, and this largely affects the bigger companies, the large players. It does to a lesser extent the smaller companies, the SMEs, and what we believe it will actually help a lot is the agri sector. So NMB is big in consumer lending, in SME lending, in micro lending, in the agri sector, yes, and also to some extent with the large companies. We have a firm strategy. This country 70% of the people in this country are actually working in the agri sector. 50% of the country is arable land and only 20% is being used. So there's an enormous growth potential in the agri sector. And this is where also the new government is focusing on, and this is where we have been focusing on. So to us, it's actually good news. And once all these agri projects will start taking off, the small ones, but also the larger, more infrastructure projects, we expect our business to grow with it as well. So it's been good.
All right, now infrastructure and agriculture have been termed as the traditional sectors. What are we seeing? Are we seeing any preferential sectors or any trends being developed now with this rapidly changing world and millennials now getting into investment in businesses?
Well, of course, there's the gas, oil and gas sector in Tanzania, where gas has been discovered. A lot of it is offshore, but it will need to be extracted. So there's high expectations for that sector in Tanzania. But still, the agri sector has the largest potential for growth. And then we're not talking about just the crop production, the crop and the harvesting, but we need to have much more production capability in Tanzania. One of my examples where I feel, this country can do this much better than what we're doing today is in the cashew nut. There's a lot of really good cashew in Tanzania. Most of it is being exported as raw cashew and then being processed outside the country. So the value add and the employment and most of the, the benefit is actually not within the country. So what this country needs is good cashew processing. So we create value add in the country, we create employment in the country, and we can export and therefore bring in more hard currency, much more value added cashew processed products rather than the raw cashew. And it's, cashew is one example. I mean, there's more. There's in the leather industry, for example. So there are many industries where we should develop processing as part of the agriculture value chain within the country and then export processed products rather than export the raw products.
All right, now you mentioned as we began, you've been here 1 year.
Yes.
But of course you had to look back at what has been done before.
Yeah.
What has been the hardest barrier for you to overcome over the past year?
I wouldn't call it a barrier, but just to coming into a new country and to understand what are the ways and means of doing business in a completely new environment. Takes time. On the other hand, banking is generally, banking is very similar in many countries. What I think is very challenging right now is what is changing banking altogether is the whole impact of the new digital. Mobile banking. Tanzania is to a large extent still very, very much a cash-based society. What we at NMB would like to achieve in the next few years is to move from cash-based to electronic, whether it's mobile or whether it's cards.
Not as easy as it sounds.
No, it is not easy. But I think we have an advantage as well, because with the mobile technology today, in this country, only 15% of the people actually have a bank account. Almost 60% of all the people in Tanzania have a mobile phone. So we can reach, all our potential customers much better over the mobile phone than we could reach them, even though we have, almost 200 branches around the country. So that is, and the technology is there, and there is very rapid development in new technology on mobile phone, digital payments, but also digital identity. And that is, the focus area for the next few years. How do we reach all those people out there, especially in the rural villages, and basically financially include them into the economy, into our ecosystem? with mobile banking and mobile payments. And so the technology is there now. Execution, plans are great. Execution, of course, is the hardest.
Policy deliberation versus policy implementation. Now, let me just build up on what you've said. The fourth industrial revolution, which of course is a term that has been thrown around for the past couple of months. How much does it resonate with what you're saying, your long-term plans?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all based on that, basically. We still have a strategy that we're building new branches and opening new branches and ATMs. Well, we know that in other parts of the world, branches are closing down, banks are closing down branches rapidly because people have completely moved away from branch banking into digital banking. So I think we'll see a little bit more growth in the brick and mortar, but very soon we really see all the growth in the digital.
But what's the rationale behind that particular point? Having actual presence well within, outside the cities and more.
Yeah.
What's the rationale behind that?
Having the presence there?
Yes.
Well, because that is today what our customers expect from us. Right. They still today expect to see a bank, a wall, 4 walls, and a vault probably, because that's what the bank symbolizes to most people.
So financial inclusion is still a crucial issue to be tackled.
Yeah, it's one of our biggest agenda items for the years to come.
And now, informal sector and access to finance for SMEs. The average rate at the moment, 70 to 75%, largely informal, hard to quantify on this. How are you tackling it on this end?
Basically same way, mobile technology. If you allow me, I can just give you an example. We work with a company, an NGO called CARE International, who basically helps village savings and loans. And what we've said, those were all cash-based. So you would have a small village and people put cash in a box, and there'll be 2 people with a key to the box, and someone in the village needs a loan and they take cash out. So what we've said to them, all of that can actually happen on a bank account, and you can access that bank account through your mobile phone. So we've worked with a few villages, and mostly the women in those villages who were using this completely cash-based informal savings, it's all informal, savings and loan system. And we've developed it on a banking platform together with them to make them feel comfortable that using that on a bank account is as easy, if not easier, as putting the money in a box. And the good thing about it is if you have a mobile phone, you can actually see the balance. And otherwise, you have to every time open the box and count the money. And also, if there's money on a bank account, you actually receive a little bit of interest, while that cash money in a box would never, any interest would be added to that. So that's how you need to go about it. Same with, far away farming communities. People there, as provided there is mobile phone coverage, have a mobile phone, can receive messages about, their crops, the value of, how can they sell their sunflower, seeds at what price to such and such trader. They can go to the trader, they can sell, they can receive their money either on a bank account or on a mobile wallet account. Well, all of that, in the past was all informal and was purely cash. So we're looking at these, opportunities and value chains, and look at how people behave cash and move that into, a mobile way of doing business for people to realize and understand that actually mobile is easier than cash. And that's how we need to move, away from the cash into the mobile. And as soon as it is mobile and it's on a bank account, it becomes part of the formal economy.
All right. Of course, as we talk about the SMEs, we have to talk also about parity in terms of gender.
Yeah.
Women in particular, we have very keen to know, very deliberate efforts that you have targeted to that demographic.
Yeah. Number of initiatives. At NMB, we work together with an organization called Women's World Banking, an NGO particularly looking at what does it take to access women, small business owners, and women as members of a family, because it takes a little effort to convince women to open a bank account, especially in the more rural areas. So we have a target to say we want to target women business owners, SMEs, and women, because quite often women are taking care of their families and of their children and trying to save some money for their children's education, for example. Like in so many countries, women have less access to financial services than men. So you need to make an extra effort, and you need to think about what does it take to convince women to feel comfortable with having bank accounts, and on a bank account start saving for their children's education, or have a bank account if they have a small business. Quite often there's the safety aspect. Money in your pocket or your home can be stolen. Money on your bank account, cannot be stolen. Yeah, stays in the bank and actually earns some interest.
Right. Do you have any particular numbers as to the target for women you're looking at?
No, we're actually now getting the numbers. We've just this year said this is what we want to target on. So we're working on getting the baseline and the numbers, and then we'll just say year on year we want to increase those numbers.
All right, now let's trickle back into what you touched on in agriculture. Now, turning Africa into an agrarian powerhouse, how do financial institutions help in this regard? Very deliberate as well. It's not going to be easy since most farmers in Africa are still subsistence farmers.
That is the challenge. But what I believe works is clustering. So having a number of larger commercial farms and a cluster of very small farmers around them. Because if you have a large commercial farm, you have an infrastructure, you have probably access to road. A large farmer will have access to transportation to bring any produce to a market or a marketplace that small farmers don't have. Large farmers will have the ability to be scalable in terms of their purchasing, purchasing fertilizer and other inputs. Small farmers, large farms generally have their own maybe milling and processing facilities. So the small farms around a large farm are able to sell their produce to the mill, basically, on the larger farms. And if you cluster larger commercial farms in areas where there are thousands of small farmers, that becomes an ecosystem. One of the best examples I always think is a company called KPL, Kilombero Plantations, where they do paddy and maize. And because KPL is there with its 5,000 hectares irrigated production, there are more than 7,000 small farmers around this large commercial farm who are benefiting and are growing because of the fact that there is a large commercial farm. And those initiatives, if we should have more of those, because then you can actually help the smallholder farmers grow using the infrastructure of larger commercial farms.
All right, absolutely perfect. Now, as we wind up, we need to talk about the role of capital markets in developing both your business model and the economy as well.
Yeah.
There has been an issue about pension funds. We are seeing them take the bulk of the companies here that are listed. They're the ones who invest the most. We also see not so many individual investors. NMB itself is listed. So you should have a very clear direction as to how you hope capital markets will help sustain your business.
Yeah. Well, the timing of this interview is right. We just launched a retail bond. So this is the first ever large retail bond on the market in Tanzania. So we have a 200 billion T-shilling medium-term note program. we've launched a tranche of 20 billion just the other week. We're going out to the retail investors through all of our branches throughout the country, where we started with some education. What is a bond? Actually, when you have some money to invest and you invested in an NMB bond, what does it do for you? Well, you know, the money ideally is there for 3 years, but it pays you 13% interest every year, twice a year, so 6.5% twice a year. And so we're doing all this education, financial education in a way, and then we've launched the bond, and then we see really good interest from really, you know, all the smaller cities around the country, not just Dar es Salaam, of people who realize, hey, this is an investment opportunity that, you know, is interesting. And so for the first time, there'll be a retail bond, and it launched on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, and hopefully now people will get to know and understand what a retail bond is, and then, you know, there'll be more companies being able to actually get some funding through retail bonds. So good timing.
Oh, absolutely perfect. Thank you for that. A final word, of course, as a woman in the industry. Of course, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people looking, wondering whether you would match all the aggression that it is in this market. But what would you say to such
well, I don't think Tanzania is a very aggressive market. I think it's a very, you know, friendly business environment. I've worked in London, which was far more aggressive than Tanzania. Also, you know, relatively, there are quite a few women working in the Tanzanian, you know, market. Even look at the parliament, look at our vice president, a woman. But I know it's different, you know, and all I can say to girls and women, we just have to do it. You know, because the more women are there and the more women are working, the easier it becomes for women, you know, to be at equal par as men in the workplace. And wherever I can, I try to encourage and coach other women to go for it and choose a career in banking or a career in business. I've enjoyed it. You know, it is, you know, it's possible. You can combine a career with, you know, family life. We have 2 children, and yeah, so but you need to sometimes make some choices.
Remaining aggressive in a market that continues to change both its trends and its dynamics. This and more are some of the insights that we've heard from the CEO of the National Microfinance Bank, the largest bank in Tanzania in terms of customers and outreach. We'll leave it there. The handle is @CNBC Africa for any feedback you'd like to give on the show. Thanks for watching. I'm George Ndirangu.